A young boy is dead, allegedly shot by his stepdad, who's now facing a charge of first-degree reckless homicide. And wait until you hear what he reportedly told police, that he was showing the boy guns because it made him, quote, look cool. The story that we're following about the death of an 8-year-old boy, to say the least, it's gut-wrenching. And it also raises a lot of questions about gun safety and how the law applies to cases like this story that is developing outside of Milwaukee in a small town of Geneva. Let's go back to January 20th when all of this unfolded. In fact, according to police, we are talking about an incident that happened at 2:25 in the morning, which certainly raises some red flags that we'll get into in a little bit. Police were called to the home of Stephen Merkel. Officers reportedly found 8-year-old Michael Meagher on the floor, shot. He was taken to a hospital where he passed away. I want to show you some pictures from a GoFundMe for Michael that is live right now. It's raised more than $20,000. And it says that he was a funny and bright boy. He was loved by his friends. And he's a young boy who lost his life, reportedly for what his stepdad is alleged to have done in the early hours of the morning. I want to run through what the criminal complaint said according to local TV station WITI. Merkel, who seemed frantic and covered in blood, told police that he, quote, did something stupid. He admitted that he had been drinking, having 2 drinks of rum and RC Cola. And remember, all of this happened when most people, especially young kids, are typically sleeping in the early hours of the morning. Merkel told police that he was showing his stepson guns because it made him seem cool. Police say he took the magazine out of a 9mm handgun, and he says that he thought the gun was empty, then pointed it at the young boy, and that gun went off. The next thing he allegedly did wasn't call 911. Police say he first called the boy's grandmother, who then told him to call the authorities. Now that stepfather is facing a count of first-degree reckless homicide, which, according to the state of Wisconsin, is described as whoever recklessly causes the death of another human being under circumstances which show utter disregard for human life. Joining us now is a criminal defense attorney with a lot of experience when it comes to cases involving guns, Kathleen Bogenschutz. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. This is a really tough story, as I've been saying, to talk about. What sticks out to you just initially when you read some of the pieces of information we're getting about what happened in this case?
Well, the first thing that struck me was that this gentleman violated pretty much every rule of gun safety at the same time, assuming things happened the way that he said that they did. So that the first rule of gun safety is, and I'll just do this as a PSA for your viewers, you treat every gun like it is loaded at all times. And he said that he had removed the magazine. That doesn't count if you have one in the chamber. So you treat every gun as though it is loaded at all times, even if you've removed the magazine. Number 2 is muzzle discipline, where you, and I'll show you, you only point the gun
like he
where
pointed the gun allegedly at the boy, which is just, that was such a
right.
difficult part of the story to read. Is you would never do that, even if you thought, and in this case he thought, like honestly, even if you know the gun is empty, you still don't want to take that chance.
Right. And you never point a gun at a human being unless you're prepared to shoot them. That's muzzle discipline, where you're pointing the muzzle. Number 3 is trigger discipline. And you'll even see police officers that are standing by, where you get like a news story where somebody, or one of the news photographers will catch a picture of one of the police officers standing by in a shootout where they're hiding behind a car. You'll see their arm or their gun with their trigger finger pointed forward against the side of the gun, because they're not touching the trigger until and unless they're ready to shoot someone. And so there's muzzle discipline in that he pointed it at the kid. There's trigger discipline in that he pulled the trigger, not meaning to kill someone. And then you have that he wasn't thinking about what was behind the child. Of course, it went off, he says, accidentally. And then there's securing firearms and ammo safely. So he managed to violate every single rule of gun safety at the same time.
Yeah, and the charge that he's facing is first-degree reckless homicide, which I did look up, and it seems like it is similar to a manslaughter charge. And I know states have different names, but what, for those who maybe don't follow the law all the time. What would the prosecution need to prove a manslaughter charge in this case?
A willful wanton disregard of for human life, and that he acted in a way that could have led to the death or serious bodily injury of another person. And certainly, when you go through what he did, yeah, I thought the gun wasn't loaded, but I still pointed it at a child after I had been drinking.
Yes.
And then I pulled the trigger as some kind of a joke. I mean, it's difficult to come up with a more uh, concise uh, description of what that level of homicide would be in a law school classroom. In fact, this is very similar to something that a law school professor would posit to his or her class to for the example of manslaughter.
Because another red flag in this, and I didn't realize it till after the town of Geneva puts out a press release, and you read through it, and these details are terrible. There's local media reports giving some of the statements that he reportedly gave to police. But then you see the time that police were called to this home, and they were called at 2:25 in the morning. And we're talking about a kid who is 8 years old. What sticks out to you? How could that come into play in court if this goes to trial?
Well, certainly my first thought as the mother of a small child is, where is this child's mother, if this is his stepfather? And I hate to say it that way because I know she's lost her son, but what are the family dynamics in this household as to why he's up drinking at 2 o'clock in the morning with the 8-year-old? And one of the statements he made was, I was just trying to look cool and I did something stupid. And I like guns, middle of the night, alcohol. I mean, there's reasons that prosecutors put curfews on people when they're out on bond, and it's because, to quote what I used to say in first appearance, nothing good happens after midnight.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what you could possibly be doing with an 8-year-old at that time, unless somebody wet the bed.
Yeah, and to think, all the details that he reportedly told police, to go from that line that caught everybody's attention, that's been a headline saying that he was trying to look cool, admitting to drinking, to now put on your criminal defense hat. How difficult of a case is this going to be for his attorneys, knowing that he made all of these statements to police when they came to the house?
My big concern, if I were representing him, is that this charge doesn't get upped to something more serious because, you know, we're talking about 2 o'clock in the morning. We're talking about somebody who was drinking. What is this 8-year-old doing out of bed? What is the family dynamics? I, I, I really feel like there's going to be some other facts that come out here that are a little bit, hard to take for those of us, especially those of us with children,
Yeah.
that, what in the name of God was going on in this house between, this kid's normal bedtime of whatever, 8 or 9 o'clock at night and 2 a.m.
Because for you, and I know you're joining us from Florida, and jurisdictions are different, what could an elevated charge look like if right now he's facing this first degree reckless homicide charge?
I mean, I would be worried about, whether he just got angry at the child and decided to scare him by pulling the trigger, or he wanted to discharge the gun to scare the kid into compliance and ended up shooting him, or even something more sinister than that, where there was something intentional that happened here. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just all the facts together lead me to believe that, and I know we don't have all the facts too, I should say that, but my first concern as a criminal defense attorney would be that it doesn't get elevated to some kind of murder count.
Because that was one of the questions that I had, is how do police at this point know? I mean, just based off the idea that he reportedly told police that he pointed the gun at someone else, that we know that it was just an accident that happened. What typically is the
And that he
process when
meant to
someone is
pull the trigger when he did. It's not like the gun
right?
just went off, or I meant to
So,
pull the trigger, I just didn't think it was loaded.
so even though he's charged right now police are likely continuing an investigation. We would assume, I mean, we'll wait for more information to come out, but police are continuing the investigation to confirm likely that this was in his eyes an accident and he didn't know that there was a bullet in the chamber.
Right. And so things like cell phones, text messages, um, this is if you're telling the truth, your phone is your friend. If you're not, it's usually not, whether he
Yeah.
was in some kind of an altercation with the victim's mother, because she's not home at 2 o'clock in the morning. I've got questions as to, there was one article who said that they were divorced or divorcing. I don't know if that's true. Again, we'll have to wait to see how the facts play out, and that their GoFundMe page indicates that the child had two sisters as well. So where were those children? What do they know? What did they see? I'm sure we're going to have forensic interviews. We're going to have phone dumps. We're going to have computer dumps. Neighbors that have ring cameras or any
Mhm.
other kind of surveillance that might be able to put a little bit better of a parameter as to when something occurred, whether there's surveillance videos even inside the house. I mean, all these things take time, and I think we're going to get some more information as we go forward. And I will say, I haven't looked up the law in Wisconsin, but oftentimes in Florida, and I say we as a former prosecutor, um, will arrest somebody for murder two and then indict them for murder one, because you can only charge murder one by indictment in Florida. Like I said, I have not checked up on Wisconsin laws. It's also possible they could be waiting to just prevent or present the evidence to a grand jury and see what the grand jury thinks, and maybe do a little bit of investigation with subpoenas to a grand jury.
I saw his most recent court appearance he waived. So he had a bond hearing where they set it at $250,000, and then he was going to have a first court appearance. Again, I know each state and jurisdictions can be different, but why does typically speaking, a defendant waive that appearance?
Assuming this was truly an accident and that he cared for this child, I would be concerned about his mental health and getting a counselor in to see him. He could waive his appearance because it's a small town and it's such a big uh, case up there that he doesn't necessarily want to be paraded in front of the cameras. And his attorney can advise him of what happened in court. And most defense attorneys and at most court appearances can waive their client's appearance. So it could be any number of those things.
Not to put you on the spot, but as a criminal defense attorney, if this is your client, you talked about having the concerns that this charge could be elevated. I mean, knowing the things that he told police, according to these local media reports, how do you defend him?
Well, first of all, um, I clearly he didn't have me representing him when he talked to the police the first time. I think I probably would have advised him to stay silent initially, um, and then we'll have to see what the body cam bears out. Most police officers these days do have body cams, so there's not going to be too much arguing over what he said at the scene, the way that we would have maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Either he said it or he didn't, and it's on camera or it's not. So that at least narrows down what we're dealing with. Also,
Mhm.
I'm a little bit, you know, my questions for him are more personal, like what's your history with guns and this gun in particular? What did you know about this gun? Have you ever gone to the range with this gun? Where did you buy it? Have you had any firearms training? Because a lot of firearms training is to negate this particular scenario. So
Right.
I think that all of those kind of fall into whether you could try to elevate this to maybe a murder two scenario.
Because obviously the right to bear arms, Second Amendment, that gets very political. I'm not getting into that. But also, when you look at the facts of the case, this is someone who clearly doesn't know how to handle a firearm. I mean, in terms of not knowing that there was that extra round in the chamber, the idea, as you pointed out, that he pointed the gun at someone else. Um, I guess, how does a person like this, in your experience as someone who's handled cases, I guess, how common is it for the person in these situations to not really have an idea of how to use that gun, even though they went and bought it? And at this point, it appears the gun was registered. They haven't said that it wasn't.
Yeah, I'm questioning how long he's had it, and whether he's cleaned it. You know, what's your history with this gun? Um, the fact is that many states don't require you to do a basic gun safety course, and it's my position, just as a PSA, if you're going to buy a firearm for your home, shell out the money for a basic firearms safety course.
Hmm.
Um, there's information in there that is uh, in, incredibly useful in your daily life. And I mean, if you consider the fact that clearly there's small children in this home, and this gun, at least at the time that this guy was playing around with it, it wasn't secure. I mean, kids and guns don't mix. And I can't tell you how many times I have seen a small child maimed or killed because he or she found a gun and was playing with it. And that's another type of case that I used to do within the child abuse and child neglect unit. And I'll also say, as a prosecutor, one of the things that when I was doing gun offenses, and particularly these kinds of like negligent type cases where it's questionable whether there was any intent to harm, the best jurors you could ever pick for the state are NRA members,
Hmm.
because and that's something that, you know, we discussed at length because we had a whole gun unit in Broward County when I was down there. Um, NRA members get really upset when they see cases like this because this guy is the reason there are rules infringing their
Right.
right to bear arms because of somebody doing something this dumb.
Yeah, like poster situation of poor gun ownership. I mean, clearly, as you've
Right.
run through everything that he did wrong in this case, and it cost this young boy his life. One other thing, just as we've gone through, that he did not reportedly call 911 as the first thing he did. He called somebody else. How could that matter as this case goes forward? That he called the boy's grandmother. He was reportedly frantic and said he did something stupid, but he goes to the boy's grandmother as opposed to calling authorities. And we don't know what would happen just because the boy dies at the hospital. So had I don't know how long the phone call was, but however long he was on the phone with somebody else before he called 911.
So I think that would be a question better posited to a medical examiner. I did see an
Mm-hmm.
article where the child was shot in the neck area, which leads me to believe that it was likely not a, how do I put this kindly, like not a salvageable injury.
Yeah.
Um, if a carotid artery was nicked or something like that. But certainly it would go to his intent to be able to line up the series of events where, you know, I called the child's grandmother, again, not the mother, and I'm just curious as to what's going on there, but called the child's grandmother, how much time elapsed on that phone call, and then how much time until 911 was called. And did
Yeah.
grandma then call 911 too, or tell him to call 911?
No, no, it's an important point. Thank you for coming on to talk about this. This isn't an easy story. You're a parent. I'm a parent. It's hard to talk about these. And for people who have been watching, and I know I introduced you and said you have a lot of experience with gun cases. What is your background, especially from the prosecutor, the side of being a prosecutor, when it comes to some high profile gun cases where you are in Broward County?
Yeah, I probably didn't try as many gun trials in Broward as I could have because I got a verdict on one case on February 13th, and we all know what happened on February 14th of 2018. And as I agreed with most of the defense attorneys that there was no way to get a jury because this was an incredibly traumatized community. And one of them said to me, I can't pick a jury on this case. These people would convict their own mother. And, you know, it takes something like this to traumatize a community, I think, to really be serious about gun safety and really be serious about things like red flag laws, which is something that came out after Parkland in Florida, thankfully. Um, so like I said, he violated every single rule of gun safety at the same time in this case. I don't know what other laws you could possibly pass to try to prevent this, other
Yeah.
than, forcing somebody to go to a gun safety class. And even then, I mean, he's drinking and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Nothing good happens after midnight. So
No.
my heart goes out to the family.
Yeah, you just think of the family, had siblings. Clearly, based on the GoFundMe, he was a beloved child, was bright, was funny, and life cut short because of just a horrific situation that police have detailed out of Geneva, Wisconsin. Kathleen Bogenschutz, criminal defense attorney from Broward County, former prosecutor. Thank you for taking the time to join us here on Law and Crime.
Thanks for having me.
Merkel waived his first court appearance. He is being held on $250,000 bond. We'll continue to follow this story as it develops. For Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.